Thank you. We'll call this meeting of the Task Force on Election Reform, I guess we're calling it, to session. All of the members of the task force here, thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to be here to hear from public testimony. And I think we've been doing this for a few months, but I thought it would be probably helpful to reset for folks who might be interested in talking with us this evening, as well as folks at home who might watch this tonight or at some point in the future, to talk a little bit about the process of how this task force came to be and introduce the members. So at the beginning of the year, the Board of Elections, our friend Eileen Leahy, who was here from the Board of Elections, put together a piece of legislation to create this task force that had a six-month run to basically do a deep dive and look at sort of how elections have been run here traditionally in the city and what recommendations could be made. And they put out a call for folks who had worked in professional settings in dealing with elections and been involved in the election process here in the city in a variety of ways. A number of folks applied. All of us obviously applied. And then basically the Board of Elections made recommendations to the mayor, who made recommendations to the council, and the council passed a resolution to create this committee back in February, I believe. So that's sort of how we got here. And what we're charged with doing and with our time frame. So just by way of background, I'm going to ask everyone to sort of introduce themselves and explain a little bit who they are and why they're interested in doing this before we get into this. But my name is Ian Pfeiffer. I've been involved in sort of elections here in the city as a member of a central committee, as a candidate, and as an alderman for 8 years, as well as working in sort of politics and policy at the federal and state level, where I've definitely dealt with election laws and sort of how those are written and rewritten in a variety of roles. So that's sort of what brings me here to try and I think having been on the council and know that whatever recommendations are made here by all of us will go back to the council and will have to be introduced, and we'll go through the normal process where people will be able to testify and they will figure out which of our recommendations they're taking, which ones they're not, and how they're going to move forward and however they sort of undertake that. So just as sort of the lay of the land of where we're headed. So for me, it's an interesting opportunity to try to get together and learn from lots of very smart people who are approaching this from different ways to see how we can make the best recommendations to move the city forward. So I'll pass it off to Faye.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Faye Gaskin, and I was interested in being a part of this task force and applied because I have been in a community activism for some time now, and I just want to ensure that as changes are made and recommendations are made to the council, that they took into account all parts of our community, that there are still fair and accessible elections, and I just want to make sure that all perspectives were heard.
Thank you. Scott?
Good evening. I'm Scott Gibson. I've been interested in elections and public policy for a long time. I come to this work with a varied background, formerly an adjunct faculty member at both Mount St. Mary's University in Emmitsburg and Hartford Community College, where I taught political science, specifically state and local government, with a comparative focus on elections. I've been a treasurer for state campaigns. I've been a treasurer for City of Annapolis campaigns, and recently ran in Ward 2 for the City Council. One of the observations that I've had for a long time is that for such a politically active city, our elections don't show it in terms of participation, whether it's people running as candidates or people voting. Turnout is incredibly low. And I've wondered aloud sometimes whether there are structural issues that cause that. So I was energized to join this and lend a hand with the work. Thank you.
Andrew?
Thanks. Andrew Miller. I'm a assistant professor of political science at the Naval Academy. I'm here in my personal capacity, not representing the Academy or the U.S. government. I'm a Ward 1 resident, and I joined the committee primarily because I think local politics get lost in national narratives, but they can have a very high impact. So I wanted to contribute to potential reforms, updating of processes, that sort of thing here in the city. So thanks.
Hi, my name is John Michael Gudger. I've lived in Annapolis the majority of my life. I worked at the state legislature and am currently an employee at the Carroll County Board of Elections. I joined this committee because I joined this task force because I thought that, my expertise in state elections and kind of our options there would be helpful. And I thought that, the city was in dire need of an update.
Good evening. I'm Eileen Leahy. I am the Ex-Officio member of the task force and a member of the Board of Supervisors of Elections. So I'm very excited that the task force has been formed and the work that they're doing, as there's lots of opportunity, not just for Annapolis to upgrade its election code, but also to take the lead in looking at some of the trends for the future. And again, also making sure that elections are fair, accessible, and consistent. So thank you. Thank you to everybody that came out tonight.
Great, thank you so much, everybody. So as I think everyone's aware, we undertook a survey fairly recently to sort of gauge what people in our community felt about a variety of topics that we might be considering. Andrew's going to sort of walk us through an explanation of some of the findings.
All right, thanks, Ian. So I'm going to briefly, and I'll emphasize briefly, walk through the questionnaire that Ian just mentioned. So just to clarify, to begin with, the focus of this task force, and therefore the focus of the questionnaire, was on municipal elections. So that's how we elect our mayor and aldermen and women. It's not about county council members, electing congresspersons, senators, or anything above mayor and alderperson. So let's go ahead and just start with discussing the purpose of the questionnaire and then the process that we undertook to develop it and distribute it. So the reason we did this in the first place is we wanted to provide residents with an opportunity to give input to the task force as a complement to the standard public comment process. All right, so it's not like a substitute to that process, but just in addition to it, and it's a way to kind of go beyond it in some ways to try to solicit input from city residents. So step one was that, as you might expect, we developed the questions, and we had a lot of input from the Board of Supervisors of Elections in doing that. We also pre-tested those questions to make sure that they're intelligible. That means we gave them to folks. They gave us feedback. This made sense. This didn't make sense, to try to make them, as I said, as intelligible as possible. We had a limited number of questions that we could ask, so we wanted to keep it short. We also wanted to be mindful of citizens' time who were answering the questionnaire, so we kept it to 10 questions. And I should say, just because a question appeared about, say, a certain reform on the questionnaire, that doesn't mean that the task force is necessarily adopting a position on that particular reform. The idea, again, was just to gauge interest of city residents. So after we developed the questionnaire, we distribute the link in online and offline formats. You can see here some of the examples of where and how the questionnaire was distributed. We had press release, social media, physical posters, community events, and the like. And this was primarily done with the help of Mitchell Stevenson, who is the the mayor's information officer. Final step, of course, is we gathered responses. We did that between July 24th and August 11. In total, we received responses from 661 individuals who submitted the questionnaire. Now, that's pretty good in terms of a number, but I want to be important, or I want to emphasize, importantly, that the questionnaire is not a scientific survey. Okay, it's fundamentally different than a scientific survey, which would have a representative sample of Annapolis residents. You can see here that we had a higher proportion of respondents from some wards relative to other wards. So we had a large number of respondents proportionally from wards 1, 2, and 8. And that's to be expected with an opt-in questionnaire where you're going to get some unevenness in the response rate. So you can see here wards 1, 2, and 8. It's the Historic District, Eastport, West Annapolis, et cetera. So in addition to that, there's some unevenness in party affiliation. So we asked respondents to self-report which party they're affiliated with or if they are unaffiliated. And then we compared that to the 2021 registered voting rolls, voter registration rolls, and looked at party affiliation on those rolls. And you can see here that we had fewer Democrats reply by roughly 6 percentage points to the questionnaire relative to the 2021 registration numbers, but we had more Republicans reply. So there could be a lot of reasons for this. Maybe party affiliations has changed since 2021, but we just wanted to provide some context to the responses before presenting them. So let's go ahead and jump into them, right? So first question was, we asked about which voting methods should be used in the city elections. And we provided 3 options. Respondents could check all that apply. And the 3 options were automatic mail-in ballots. So voters would be sent the ballots automatically without having to request them. The other option is that voters had to request mail-in ballots. And then the third option is in-person voting. So we still see that there's strong support for in-person voting. And there also is around half of respondents supported the issuance of automatic mail-in ballots. Next, we asked about primary elections. So we wanted to see how primary elections could be conducted in the city, how residents felt about that. And we gave 3 options as well for this question. So the first option are what are called closed primaries. This is what we have now, okay? In this scenario, if you're a Democrat, you can vote for the Democratic candidate for a given position. If you're a Republican, you can vote for the Republican candidate for a given position to move on to the general. Unaffiliated voters cannot vote in the status quo closed primary status that we have now. So we looked at that, and then we also gave an option to move to semi-closed primaries. With semi-closed primaries, it's effectively the same as a closed primary. The only difference is that unaffiliated voters can choose which party to vote for. So if somebody's unaffiliated, not registered with a particular party, they can say, I want to vote in the Republican primary, or I want to vote in the Democratic primary. And then finally, we provided the option of blanket primaries, which are in effect nonpartisan primaries. So with the blanket primary, all the candidates are listed on one ballot, and they're not representing particular political parties. And the top vote getters within that primary move on to the general election, right? So fundamentally different than what you have with closed primaries and semi-closed primaries. And we can see here we had the strongest level of support for those blanket primaries, with 46% of respondents favoring that, followed by continuing the status quo of closed primaries. Next question is, we looked at the timing of the election. So there's effectively 3 options when we could hold our elections. We could continue with the status quo, which is we hold them in years where there are no other elections happening. So our next municipal election is slated for 2025. Other options include gubernatorial elections, so we could hold them during the gubernatorial election. That is when we elect our governor in 2026 and so on. Or we could hold them during the presidential elections, which I'm sure everybody knows here is coming up in 2024 next year. There is a roughly equal support for maintaining the status quo, that is holding them when there's no other elections, as well as holding them during gubernatorial elections. Next question that we asked is that, should non-citizen residents be able to register to vote in city elections? I believe this was included at the request of the chair of the Board of Supervisor elections, because it's done in some other cities in Maryland. The response, I think, is quite clear to this. So 73% of respondents oppose non-citizen resident voting in the city. Should same-day voter registration be offered on election days? So right now, the city does not offer that, to my understanding. The county does offer that. The results suggest, by a modest margin, 50 to 45, that respondents would like to see same-day voter registration in the city. So that's the result there. Next question is, should the voting age be lowered to 16 for Annapolis elections? Again, this is not an ambiguous finding, I would say. In this case, 85% of respondents oppose lowering the voting age. So currently in the state of Maryland, 16-year-olds are actually allowed to register to vote, and this allows them to be election judges and serve in other capacities, but they are not allowed. To vote as of now, and it's clear most respondents oppose having them vote. One comment asked if any of us had teenagers on the task force. So, strong opposition to that. Then finally, should there be term limits for alderpersons on the city council? There seems to be relatively strong support for that, with about 73% of respondents favoring term limits. In the comments, there's some variety or variation in what folks saw as an appropriate number of term limits. Some said just one, some said two, some said more were appropriate. So there's a support for term limits, but there's a little bit of, like I said, variation in how many terms council members and mayors should serve, or specifically in this case, alderpersons. So as I said, we're limited to 10 questions. So another purpose of this survey was to get more ideas that we didn't necessarily ask about. And we had about 250 comments submitted as part of the questionnaire. And I just want to highlight a few of those sets of comments that were made. We had 20 comments related to alternative voting systems. So alternative voting systems might be, for instance, ranked choice voting, approval voting, star voting systems. I'm not going to go into the ins and outs of these particular systems, but it's worth keeping in mind that these systems can be either partisan or nonpartisan, and their adoption has different implications in a number of respects in terms of competitiveness, spoilers, and that sort of thing. We have talked about, like as a task force, ranked choice voting to date. One thing we haven't talked much about, but was brought up in the comments section, was there's 12 comments about voter ID and issues surrounding trust in elections. That's something, again, we haven't talked much about here as a task force, but again, it appears to be a concern, at least for those responding to this survey. And number of other issues, I'm not going to go through them all here, but for instance, there's 3 comments related to campaign finance. This one says, I support public financing of elections and would like to see it in Annapolis. Right? And just to reiterate, just because people commented about it, that doesn't mean they commented in support of these particular issues, but there were, this is giving you a sense of the volume of comments about a given issue. We also got a number of thank yous in the comment, and we should emphasize thank you, especially those who responded to this survey. It's been very helpful for us, gives us direction, gives us a sense of what residents would like to see. So I will go ahead and turn it back over to Ian. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for walking through that, and thanks for all the work that went into it to put that together and field those responses. So now we want to hear from you. Thank you for taking the time to come out and be here tonight. We're going to sort of follow the City Council's process, which is anyone who wants to speak, approach the podium, you press the button to turn on the light so they can hear you at home. The council usually does 3 minutes. I'm happy to do 5 minutes since we have such a limited turnout. If you have 5 minutes worth of things to say, feel free. And just ask at the beginning, I don't think we have a sign-up sheet back there, but anyone who would like to go, just say your name and your address would be great to start off. So
it's on the podium.
Is it?
The sign-up sheet.
Okay. Has anyone signed up? I mean, but so.
They can speak and just sign up.
Yeah, exactly. So feel free, anyone would like to start it off, and you just put your name on there. Thank you.
There we go. Should I fill this sheet out right now, or? Okay. So I'm George Gallagher, 1212 Barbud Lane. So for this election, I don't know where this committee's go. Are you committee or commission? Task force. So I don't know what direction you're going in as far as the mail ballots. So in the last election cycle, there was a universal mail-out program. But for the other elections not pertaining to the city of Annapolis, the mail-in ballots were requested mail-in ballots. So I don't know where the committee's going with that. I think that universal mail-out ballots is problematic because the voter rolls, based on my personal canvassing of Ward 6 where I live, I found some significant discrepancies in certain neighborhoods. There were some homes where there were 6 people registered and 1 person was there. And I actually talked to that 1 person and said, are you this person? They go, yes. And the other 5 people, oh, they haven't been here for years. And the voter roll that I was using to do that was 3 days old. So, and I actually had this happen in about 5 homes one day where there was 5 people, 5 people registered, 2 people were there. There was one home that I actually came back to 3 times in a month where there were 6 people registered. I think it was at Halfway House. The trash cans were unused. There was no one parked there. They were so if anything got mailed there, these registered voters, there was nobody physically there for the 4 weeks leading up to the election. So that universal mail-out ballot, I don't know what's happening to those ballots. And why this is concerning is because there's no signature verification. So if anybody gets their hands on those ballots, they can fill them out and sign them any way they want. And so there isn't a system of security that the county presented, and I haven't seen one from the city of Annapolis, where there is some type of signature verification so we can ensure those mail-out ballots are being filled out by the person who's supposed to be filling them out. So that's something I want the task force to take a close look at, this whole concept of mail-in ballots and ensuring the person who's filling it out is actually the person who's intending to vote.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. I will just... All right.
Who'd like to go next? Okay.
Did we have any other mailing? Usually mentioned was email. We did receive.
Did we?
Did we get any? Did we get any online?
Okay. Welcome.
Hello. Janet Katz, 143 Spa Drive. I'll sign the form here.
And you can press the button on the microphone level.
Okay, thank you. Well, I had a question, and it was related to the data that you derived from the survey. First off, thank you for doing that and for finding an innovative way to solicit public opinion. I know anytime you do a marketing effort or direct mail or direct targeting effort, it's having people respond is always a challenge, but it was a good response rate. I have a question about the timing in terms of when should the elections be held. Currently, obviously, we align on our own calendar. We will be doing the 2025 is the next anticipated election for the alderpersons and for the mayor in the city. Understanding that you're going to be presenting this information to the city council and then they can do with it, I guess, what they want. We don't really know what could happen to it. When you're presenting your findings, how are you going to, I guess, what's going to be your driving mission to try to have your point of view communicated to the city council in terms of like what initiatives they might be taking moving forward? That's kind of just a question I had in general. But also, when I was going back to when I said about the dates, with the next election anticipated to be 2025, should a change be made to align with, I guess it would be the governor, which we just had, so that's obviously an off year, and it would, and I believe in the question did a good job of clarifying, then that means it would either shorten or extend the existing if it were to be implemented this cycle. One suggestion I would have is if you are going to, in your findings and write this up, perhaps it's fair to everybody involved who's planning and working on campaign efforts right now that it would be implemented after the next election. So 2025 would still occur as planned, and then that would go for the anticipated length of time since voters had voted for the current team to serve 4 years. And it would be shorting them if they were relieved of that duty 1 year short, and it would be maybe overextending them than desired. So that would be potential, to like just have the election still occur, but yet have it be clearly communicated it's going to, when the next one after that would occur. Mr. Gallagher also brought up a very good comment about, mail-in ballots, which I know I hear. I have a lot of ears on the ground in town, and that is a very concerned effort due to the number of anomalies that exist with the current voter rolls, as well as any potential for nefarious type of activities related to mail-in ballots and trying to have that whole chain of custody really be certified, all the way through the process. You don't really know if the actual person who ballot is coming back was really filled out by that person. Obviously concerning our identities these days and how valuable they are, and I think having a voter ID is critical to ensure that folks who are actually casting that vote are who they say they are. Now, if it were a mail-in situation, then it would probably require some signature verification, just some sort of authenticity about who is really filling out these ballots, and ensuring that those who are elected in the city to run our beautiful town are actually those who the voters have selected, accurately and authentically.
Great.
Right.
Thank you very much. And just as from my perspective, at least, about the timing issue of if the recommendation and then the council was to enact moving to on a different cycle, whether it's the presidential, I think, realistically, we're talking a cycle or two down the road, right? Yeah. Because I think we were just talking about this earlier, that really everyone is focused on 2025, but the chance for anyone who's running for any office in the city to file, to start the campaign, is next August in 2024. Mm-hmm. So obviously people are making plans that they want to be involved, and you couldn't very well sort of say, no, we're changing to a different cycle and everyone's extended so you put your finger on one of the sort of thorny issues, which is how you would, if you wanted to go in that route, how would you get that from here to there, right? But mm-hmm. I think it's safe to say 2025 is going to be sort of done the way, it has traditionally been done on that cycle.
It will occur as anticipated, and then it will maybe either be a 3-year term or a 5-year term, depending on it has to align.
I can't imagine it's. Yeah. I mean, obviously, if the council decided to do that, they would have to do it sort of on the back end, right? Yeah. But I mean, they would need to do it before August to make it real, because anyone who's going to file, they need to know what term they're running for and what the terms are, and so
exactly.
I think that's the window of time. But unless anyone has anyone else,
and just it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek, but do you really think they're going to vote for term limits? Kind of asking parents to parent themselves. I don't know, but it's great though that they should hear the feedback from the residents. So thank you.
Sure, Andrew.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't want to say skepticism is warranted, but yeah, I mean, maybe it's unusual for incumbents to vote for term limits. But there's other ways to make reforms, right? For instance, like ballot questions, and citizens potentially could try to get a ballot question to try to implement these reforms. So so it's more than just having to rely on the council to do something like that.
Great idea.
Yeah.
Anyone else like to be heard? Okay, sure. Absolutely. So obviously for anyone who's watching at home or people who want to share with their friends and neighbors, obviously there's lots of ways to comment, not just showing up here tonight, which we thank you all for doing who did. But it's available on the website on the link that announced this public hearing. That will remain open. People can submit comments that way about the report, about anything that they're so moved to do. So please take advantage of that. And I guess with that, we'll close the public hearing. Unless anyone else wants to be heard. Great. Yeah, I mean, I think we'll probably be able to, figure out how we can share them out publicly once they, but we can
read facilities that came in.
Sure.
No. They were working on it.
So yes, we will figure out how to, just like sort of some of the responses to the survey, obviously we'll figure out with the city how to sort of share out those comments that people have come in so people can benefit from them. Great.
Can I ask Mr. Gallagher a question?
Sure.
Mr. Gallagher, do you mind if I ask you a question? You had made a comment about several houses that you went to that had discrepancies with mail-in ballots. Did you do that in an official capacity, or were you just as a citizen, a concerned citizen, going and asking questions? I'm just trying to get some context for that.
What was the question about what capacity I was in?
Yeah, did you do that like in an official capacity, or were you just as a concerned citizen trying to determine the legitimacy of the
Well, I was involved in a campaign.
Okay.
So I was knocking on doors, and what I noticed was that the people that were on my list were not actually physically there. So what I did is I actually said, well, maybe my voter roll is poor. So I contacted the county and requested, I said, I want your most up-to-date list, and I want to go back and make sure that I'm just not seeing an issue of an old voter roll. So that's what happened. And then I went back and I went through different streets, and I started noticing at certain locations in certain streets, there were significant differences between what was on the voter roll and what I was actually finding. And each time I did it, I was able to confirm with a registered voter in the house as to the fact that these people weren't there or hadn't been there for a long period of time or had moved out. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we, what else do we have, Eileen? I know we, obviously yeah. Yeah, but you have that thing you want to, yeah.
One of the things we did do with the questionnaire was to ask people to voluntarily submit their emails for a gift certificate, a $25 gift certificate. It was one of our ways to try to get people to garner some interest and also to answer. So we had 139 people give their emails. They're all in a box. And we have, we end up with 3 gift certificates, one to Eastport Kitchen, one to Caliente Grill, and one to Sweetheart's Patisserie. So, get you all.
And now the big reveal.
So we will be contacting, I won't give the whole address, but S.E. Brown will get the bakery gift certificate. Winey White will get the Caliente Grill, and then Eat Tacno will get the Eastport Kitchen. So we will be emailing you to get further information to get those to you. And we do thank everybody for answering the questionnaire, realizing it was over the summer. But 661 was, I think, exceeded our expectations. So thank you, Annapolis.
And thank you very much, Eileen, and for everyone who helped organize not only the survey, but sort of this element of it too. This is, has been a really, as we get up against our 6-month deadline since we were created, and that we're, to make some recommendations. I think, it's been a really good, interesting process, and lots of, my colleagues here have been really sort of open-minded about how to approach it. So it's really helpful to see the comments that we receive for you as we go off and figure out how to make recommendations that we can agree on. So thank you for taking the time to come out. I think we're, obviously the meeting started at 6, we're about 6:40, so I'm not sure I'm holding out hope for many more people to walk in. So I think with that, we'll close the public hearing, and unless anyone else has anything else, we can adjourn the meeting. Us. Do you have the minutes?
I sent them
yes.
by email to everybody. Sorry, I didn't think we were taking actions.
Yeah, we're gonna meet next week in a normal meeting where we'll be making stuff, and we'll just do the minutes then, if that's okay. Thank you. So with that, unless there's any final comments, we have a motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
All in favor? Aye. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.